Hello everybody, toast to you and all you do. Hope you're having a fantastic day. So I made another video on this topic that I'm going to talk about right now with the holidays and the celestial wheel and energies. And because it was guided by my spirit guides, it was very random. So I almost started a fire when I was going to make the moon video. And I was like, oh, maybe we should talk about fire. And they were like, let's talk about the energy of the year. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that first. That way I don't have them buzzing in my ear the whole time I'm making the moon video. But to be quite honest, the video was very, very chaotic and sporadic and not a great, let's talk about the energy of the year, I guess. Energy over the year and the cycle and all that stuff. So I wanted to start over again. And we'll make a video that's a little less crazy and a little more focused. So I want to start with nomenclature and the names in which we call all of the holidays. This is one of those areas of debate almost that people get kind of finicky about because depending on where you learned or what practice you learned or who you read or whatnot, you have learned a different name for the holidays. Now, most people have read a Scott Cunningham book or a Gerald Gardner book or a Buckingham, whatever his name is. He wrote the witch's big black book of definitions. I'm not a big fan. I just can't remember his name. His writing is too stern for me. And I feel like if he was talking to you, he would always use this very monotone and stern voice, like I know everything and you cannot argue with me and this is the way it is. So it's just hard for me to really get into his books. But I mean, I do have all of his several of his dictionaries. I imagine there's more out there. I like a Scottish witchcraft book. It's not too bad. Anyways, so if you've read one of these people's book, you have probably been introduced to the Wheel of the Year as titled through more of a Celtic calendar. So we have the holidays that fall from Yule, Imbolc, Ostra, Litha, Lunasa. But because Lunasa is hard to say, it kind of got shifted to the Anglo-Saxon title of Lammas. And then we have Maboon, which in itself is a misnomer. And then we have Samhain, or Samhain, however you have chosen to pronounce it. Again, these are Gaelic terms, and therefore their English pronunciation, or their spelling is Gaelic and cannot be. So you get like Lunasa, which is spelled like Lagasnagasnaga. So these titles have become popularized through Gerald Gardner and Scott Cunningham and through this branch of paganism. Now, if you follow more of a Roman or Greek practice, you have different names for these holidays. They're even celebrated on slightly different days. So you have like Saturnella. You have Lupus Day, something about, it starts with an L. See, if I had it in front of me, I would know it. But I, like many pagans, my first book was Scott Cunningham's Guide to Living Wicca or whatever. And so that's the first book that I wrote. Those were the names that I was introduced to from the beginning. And that's the kind of way that I rolled. Now, depending on the book that you read first or who your teachers were or where you learned a different set of names or might have learned a different variation on names of these holidays. If you practice a heathen practice, you might not even celebrate these at all. You celebrate the blots, which are connected with the full moons, and those full moons are titled based upon the season and the energy of that time, much like these names. Which gets me to the naming game. There the names that were chosen by the people who chose them and from our ancestors way back in the day are based off of their experiences with nature at that time. So you find things like midsummer, and midsummer is actually the first day of summer. And that's confusing because you're like, this is the first day of summer. Why is it called midsummer? Or we have midwinter again, which is the first day of winter by these ancient people. And I say that specifically because in the modern names, that's not how I personally use midwinter. So you'll see through my videos and through like the projects that I work with, it's different. So our ancestors from this part of the world, which would have been Northern Europe, the British Isles, places where winter starts much earlier than December. And, you know, even here in Colorado, my kids are like, it's the beginning of, you know, October and it's snowing. And they're like, so is it winter? I'm like, no, the snow does not dictate our seasons. The sun does. And that's important because our ancestors, however, would have marked the transition of the sun and seen the way that the sun transitioned from in the sky in longer days and shorter days. The snow really would have dictated for them when the beginning of winter was. Because if we were living solely based off of the earth and the energy of the earth, the snow means the end of the growing season. And this is when the earth begins to go dormant and you can no longer grow these things. You have to shift your perception into this winter perception. So Samhain, or the last harvest, or All Saints Eve, or Halloween, or whatever is the name that you have chosen for there, this would have been the end of the cycle, and thus the celebration of death and the end of the cycle. And then we would have had our dormant period, and then our more dormant period because there's a lot of snow. And then as we come into February and March, we begin to awaken and we begin to have this. And then by Beltane, or high spring, which I think I skipped when I was giving my list, that would have been the first day of summer. And so that's why in some places that is what that's called. Summer. The summer festivities, the celebrating that heightened season. And so when we say now that we practice neo-paganism or modern paganism or whatever it may be, or some people don't, they practice an ancient paganism and therefore they use different names. All of these things can get really confusing because we have different names for different things. You know, I know people who are staunch to Celtic paganism, and so they only use the Celtic terms. And I also know people who don't use the word Mabun because it was one of those things like the blue moon that got written down wrong at one point in history or mishighlighted by somebody at one point in history. And the word Mabun in ancient Gaelic actually is like a title, like Mr. And so, and they don't like to use that word. Now, I don't speak Gaelic, so I'm not an expert in this, and I cannot say how our ancestors used it because I have not traveled through that dimension and into our past to witness these moments. Someday I'll figure it out. But everyone is going to have their own name for things, and I think too often in our modern practice we get caught up on these names for things. You know, you see people argue about the difference between Vesta and Hestia, like, or on all different things, okay? And they come down to names. And if we just let go of the word that we as mortals in this presence are putting on something and looked at it more as this grand energy, then it would allow us really to connect better, and it would allow us not only to connect better with these energies, but to each other and with each other. So I always love hearing about other people when they're like, oh, I practice, see, it's like on the tip of my tongue, Lupicella or something like that. Anyways, it's what they would have celebrated at this time of year and honoring the, you know, fertility and the fawns and the going out and really trying to begin to wake the earth and bring back this warmth and bring back this energy that we feel buzzing under the surface, which is the same kind of principle between Imbolc and celebrating our mothers and the milk and honoring this thing that has kept us through the winter and honoring them now, like, okay, now it is time for you to step down and step back and be able to take a break for a minute because we have these new energies presenting themselves, and we are so grateful for you and thankful. And now we're ready to manifest this new, warm, youthful energy over here. And honoring that transition. And it comes full circle with honoring the death. And the end of the cycle is that we honor the beginning of the cycle. And again, this transcending energy. So, but the nomenclature gets a lot of people hung up. So through my practice and through teaching and through working with lots of different people and being all-encompassing and accepting of people's, when I give lessons about the divine, I always say some people see the divine in Jesus and some people see it in a 3-headed dog. And other people, most people, see it somewhere in the middle. But what they're saying is what is right for them in order for them to connect with this energy, the spiritual energy, and manifest it in their life. And you're going to see it how it's best seen for you. So if there's a language in which you like to speak the best, then go with that. If you have a connection to, let's say, Anglo-Saxon or Native American or anywhere in between or whatever it may be, and maybe that's the path that you follow, I have yet to find a culture that does not honor the solstices and the equinox and some days in between. They don't necessarily always fall on the in-between, like mark the exact moment, but they are relative somewhere around that time, and they honor about the same kind of energy. But again, it's dependent on how that ancestral culture interacted with the world around them. If you look at, let's say, Egyptian and Mayan holidays, however they celebrated the solstices and the equinoxes, their midpoint days don't always line up just right because they have wet seasons and dry seasons. And so it's actually like a 3 seasons kind of thing that they experienced. And different days marked those different dates. And the start of their calendars was a little different because that's how they interacted with the world. And that's the seasonal thing, so maybe you live closer to the equator, you want to connect with those energies, or maybe you don't, you just want to connect with those energies. You can still do that. You just have to find the, so say you want to work with the Egyptian calendar, you would start your calendar when the Sirius star rised, and that would be the start of your calendar, day 1 on your calendar. And then from that point, you mark your days out based off of the moon cycles and the what cycles, and it's a process. And I think that's part of the reason that people stick with, like, say, the Celtic calendar, because it's pretty easy. Your major days are on the solstices and the equinoxes, and then 40 days after that, because it is believed by the Druids that the energy must manifest itself for 40 days before you can truly honor it and celebrate it. Again, giving insight to the naming of, like, midwinter and midsummer, because you needed that time to kind of manifest that energy. So, in an effort to make it easier to discuss the holidays and the energy and such, I have found that it is easier to use winter solstice and the spring equinox, summer solstice, and the fall equinox, because they're celestial days in which we mark scientifically with a calendar. Now, I celebrate the mid-seasons as midwinter, which would be February 2nd. It's between the 2nd and the 4th, but our need to put a pin in it and say it's this exact time is another one of those things that kind of deters us from connecting with the energy of the year and what's happening. The earth does not say, oh, it's February 2nd. Today I begin manifesting midwinter energy or Imbolc energy or whatever that energy is. This is a process, and you feel it as you build closer to this, and then you feel it even greater build after the day comes, because you're like, oh, it's really happening. And that is true with all of the holidays. So we have the midwinter, and then we have high spring, because this is the height of spring. It's the middle of spring, and high spring sounds better than mid-spring, I guess. So then you have high spring. Then we have our early harvest, or midsummer. And that is when we begin collecting our fruits and our summer squash, which probably has already been harvesting at that point. But all of your early harvest things, that's when we're really seeing that manifestation of energy. And then we have the last harvest, or Samhain, or Halloween, or All Saints Eve, or there are other names for it. I just don't have my paper, and they're not in English, so it's hard to remember. So that's the end. And then we come back around to the solstice. So we have this grand cycle. And as I said, each one of these days is not like at this time, at this exact moment, when the sun hits its peak in its heightened energy, we feel this. It's a gradual build, and then it's a manifesting energy, and then it continues to manifest until it gradually shifts into that next energy. And if you look at the wheel of the year, that energy grows and transforms. It's the same energy. We have this divine blessing on Yule, or the winter solstice. So we have this divine birth. We have the beginning of the cycle, and it transforms. When we get to midwinter, the goddess is also transforming, and she has healed from that birth. And now we have both of these energies rising as their maiden selves and coming into their youthful bodies. You know, the god is coming from a child, and the goddess is transforming from the crone into the maiden. And by the time we get to the spring equinox, we have this rising, manifesting, blessing, youthful, beautiful energy that's bubbling out and forth. And it manifests into high spring when it is rich with fertility and it is blossoming and germinating and creating. And then it peaks at the summer solstice when everything has turned to manifest. And we have growth, and we have this hard work and, you know, putting your shovel to the ground kind of thing, and really honoring that growth of the earth. And then we come into our first harvest, and then we come into the equinox and that second harvest. And on both of these days, we're celebrating the abundance of the earth. However, on that early harvest, we still have that hardworking energy of summer that is about manifesting. So it's like you begin to see the benefits, but you still have to work hard. We come into the full harvest when we've collected everything, and we come into our final harvest when there's nothing left. And now we bless the seeds, we put away our stock, we know what we have, and we honor it. We honor our past, and we honor that energy. And we watch as it transforms into this new blessings. And the cycle starts again. And these energies continue to cycle throughout the year. And as you connect with them, you see that every year you can manifest new energies and grow that energy and work through it and harvest and reap what you sow and do of that and come back around and learn a new energy. Or sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years to work through that. You need another go round with the same thing. This comes with school, this comes with spirituality, day-to-day life, your relationships. All of these things can be honored with this cycle. And so as we come through the year and we honor these energies, don't get caught up on the names. Don't get caught up on what everybody's doing. Really go out and feel that energy. You know, I was always confused early in my practice about why we celebrated fire on midwinter. And I was like, well, okay, I guess, yeah, it's a candle mass. You light your candles so that you can honor the sun's return and give it that energy and put forth that as a symbolic magic to represent this exchange. Like we as the people are giving this energy to the sun so that it may return. And yes, for part of the practice, that is it. But to me, that just really didn't hit home. And I was like, I don't understand how fire is this holiday. Everything is getting wet. The snow is melting. And then I moved out into the country, and I lived in the middle of farm fields in all directions. And February comes, and as soon as the ground is dry enough, they begin to burn the fields. And it's normally early February because they have to get that early winter wheat planted, or that spring wheat, whatever. They have to start planting, and wheat needs a long growing season. So they come out and they burn the things that did not grow, and they move forward. But in watching them burn these fields and do these controlled burns and work with fire as this tool, and then working in my own garden, and I was like, I'm like weeding and I'm trying to get the soil ready and I'm trying to do these things. And I'm like, one, the soil is still really cold and I'm not able to like do things with it. And two, I've got all of these weeds and roots that are in my way and the fields around me are burning. And I'm like, oh, that's what I need to do. I have to clear this land. I have to turn it into something new. And as I lit my garden on fire in a controlled manner with the hose, like, oh my God. And then I realized how hard it is to have a burn. Like, yes, wildfires start easily. It only takes a spark. There are all of these things. But when you're trying to burn the weeds in your garden, it is not like, poof. I'm like blowing on it. I'm like fanning it. I'm pouring lighter fluid on it. I'm like, how the heck do I do this? But in this process of burning all of the weeds and clearing my garden, one, it warmed the earth so that I could turn this back into the earth. The ashes are good for the earth. They help to break down. They have different minerals and nutrients that they're putting back into the soil. Plus, there's the parts that didn't burn all the way, so they're putting nitrogen and other stuff back into the soil, and it's creating this beautiful thing. And as I did this, I was like, this isn't a new thing. I'm not the first person to have this idea, clearly. And I imagine that this does date all the way back to our ancestors, way back in the day. And you see that in these holidays. And in these celebrations, that this would have been that time. They're like, okay, we're running out of food. We need to start getting things planted. We need to make the ground ready. It's really cold outside, so we're going to start it on fire. We'll burn this stuff. We will warm the earth. We will clear the old. We will make way for the new. We will bless this land. We will plant new crops, and we will create new things so that we can continue to prosper in this cycle with the earth. But in seeing that and doing that, it really helped me to see that. And so I guess in my story is the encouragement for you to go out and see the world around you and recognize the energy that's happening around you. Listen, you hear the birds returning. I already have robins that are migrating through. I can't wait for my robin to come back. And I'm, hopefully he will. But eventually the ones that stay here will stay here. But it's beautiful and it's amazing. And it's just one of those early signs of spring where it's like, the robins are returning. Soon the sun will come back. But go out and see those things. See the grass popping through the snow. See the earth beginning to warm. Feel that happening and continue that throughout the year. And just feel the energy outside and what the earth is doing. You can even do this in the city. When I worked at a gas station is when I realized the way that the sun travels across the sky, because there were these windows that were really skinny squares that went all across one of the walls, the southern facing wall. And in one part of the year, they would blast me at the register straight in the face. It's like wintertime, straight to the face. In the summertime, they would not blast me straight in the face, and they hit a different angle, and the sun didn't perfectly line up. And it was oh, the sun does cycle across the sky, and this isn't just like a thing we read about in science. This literally happens, which led me to really research sundials and ancient sun monuments and wheels of the year based off of the travel of the sun, and they all take on this figure 8 pattern of infinity. And it sent my brain a-going. But again, that's connecting with this eternal, natural, cosmic, universal, earthly energy, all manifesting together into one, which is what creates our seasons. What is the seasons, and which is what creates the cycle of our earth and the way that we work with it. And so I challenge you to go out and really experience that with the earth and to really see how the cycles line up with you. And don't get so caught up on calling it this or that or whatever. And then know, as you watch my videos or read the things that I put out or do whatever, that when I put things out, that's the names are based off of their celestial seasonal time. So again, there are 8 holidays. They are the It's cold. I'm waiting for summer. They are the winter solstice, midwinter, the spring equinox, high spring, the summer solstice, the early harvest, the spring or the fall equinox, and the last harvest. Or if we were to call them by more commonly known names, it would be Yule, Imbolc, Ostra, Beltane, Letha, Lammas, Mabun, Samhain, which are harder to say anyways. You gotta learn all the pronunciations, Gaelic and whatnot. So, but don't get caught up on what they're called. Just honor that energy. And so right now we're honoring the energy of the earth manifesting from deep within, and we're honoring the energy of the sun growing in power, and this transformation from youthful/old into maiden/page, this bountiful energy that's ready to bless the earth. So I hope everybody is really enjoying the seasonal energy and connecting with that. And if you're not, like I said, I challenge you to go outside and just feel that energy. Listen to that energy. See it. Look at the sun. I mean, not directly at the sun, but see the sun as it rises and where it sits in the sky on the horizon, and feel it as it goes through the day, and feel, smell, and all of those things. Just experience it. So many blessings to all of you. I toast to you. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that hot jazz. And I hope you enjoy this much better video on the holidays and the seasons and the kind of connecting with that energy of the year, and being less focused on what we call it, and more focused on just getting out and experiencing it and connecting with these natural energies. See, I could just go on and on about this in circles, just like the celestial wheel. I'm so funny. Anyways, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you guys all soon.